Thank you, girls, for being here today. I'm Mary Higgins, and I'm a Girl Experience Facilitator here at Girl Scouts of Central California South. I am talking to girls all over the country, so I'm busy. I am sorry. I am at home, and I have teenagers here. Yes, dear.
Ren was asking if you got any meat for parmesan.
I can't talk right now. They'll have to figure out the grocery situation on their own. I apologize. So, again, my name is Mary Higgins, and I'm coming to you from Girl Scouts of Central California South, and today we are having our basic cooking class. And if you'll all stand and put up your salute with me, we'll say the Girl Scout promise. On my honor, I will try to serve God and my country, to help people at all times, and to live by the Girl Scout law. Girl Scout law. I will be honest and I will do my best to be honest and fair, friendly and helpful, considerate and caring, courageous and strong, and responsible for what I say and do.
Considerate and caring, courageous and strong,
Authority, use resources wisely, make the world a better place, and be
live by the Girl Scout.
So the first thing you need to do if you're going to cook food for some people is nobody likes to find hair in their food. So if I had my hair loose and long like this, you might find hair in my food. So that's no good. So the first thing you're going to do is put your hair up. Make sure you're not going to end up with any hair in your food. Now, after you've played with your hair, the next thing we need to do is wash our hands. Because my hands get real greasy when I wash, I go ahead and just wash them with dishwashing soap. Always wash your hands before you get started cooking.
Yes, I did.
And make sure you have your grown-up there to help you. So Candace, if you want to switch it over to my camera phone, I'm going to go over our supplies list. So we have fresh strawberries and blueberries from our local farm because our seniors are working on their local VOR badge today. We have lemons for our lemon juice. We have sugar to go with that first recipe. And then we also have over here, I've got it plugged into the wall. Here's my little electric chocolate warmer. And I've already put my chocolate chips in there because it takes my warmer a lot longer to heat up than if I put it in the microwave. So that's what we have for our desserts. I don't have any whipped cream today, but if you'd like to have some whipped cream on top of your desserts, you can make sure that's in your cooler, staying nice and cool. Then you need wax paper for that recipe and some paper towels. Then you'll also need a metal spoon and a metal fork. And of course, I've got my handy dandy first aid kit here in case I need a little Band-Aid. Then we have, for our next recipe, we're going to use flour. You can use all-purpose flour. You can use bread flour, which has a little more gluten in it that holds your noodles together. Or you can get this fancy semolina flour, which is a special Italian type of wheat that is used to make noodles. And then we have your bowls to mix up your noodles and rolling pins to roll out the noodles. And my countertop is tile, so I have this big breadboard to roll my noodles out on, so that I can roll my noodles out nicely. The next thing we're going to have is for our chicken parmesan. You have your chicken breast fillets, and then I have my mozzarella, my parmesan, my box grater, and my microplane grater. This is called a meat pounder. We're going to use this to flatten out our chicken. And then we'll also have over here, you're going to need to have a sauce pot for your sauce. We're not going to make homemade sauce today. You can just use whatever favorite sauce your family likes. You need a smaller frying pan for your vegetables, a larger frying pan for your chicken, and a pot to cook your pasta in with a pasta strainer. We're making chicken parmesan today with homemade noodles and blueberry pomegranate granita. Oh yes, the pomegranate juice as well. So, can you put the spotlight back on my other camera, Candace? And Miss Candace is the manager of our Girl Experience department here at Girl Scouts of Central California South, and she's joining us today, and she's helping in controlling the videos and answering questions. So the next thing we want to do, now that we have our ingredients all together, you want to grab your apron and make sure you put on your apron. There's my sous chef, my son Hawk. He's actually scrounging around for breakfast today. It's just like, I tried to warm it up already. Goodbye.
Cereal.
Okay, bye. One of the things that we have to do for one of the older girl badges, I believe it's from the junior badge, you have to cook 3 things in succession and time them so they come out together and everything is ready when you're ready to eat. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how you're going to time your recipes. So like I said, we're going to start with our dessert because that's going to take the longest. For some of you, it might not even be ready by the time our meal is done, depending how cold your freezer is. But that's okay because you can eat it later. But we will have at least 3 things, our vegetable, our noodles, and our chicken that will all get done at the same time. So what you need to do is you look at your recipes and you decide what thing is going to take the longest time, what's going to take the shortest time, and what can I cook in between the other things. So it really helps if you have all of your ingredients prepared and all set up in little bowls, all chopped up, ready to go. That is a French technique of cooking called mise en place, which means everything in its place. Now, I did not mise en place all of my ingredients today because I want to show you the proper way to chop things, to grate things so you can be safe. But most times when you watch a cooking show on TV or on YouTube, they will already have everything in all their little cups ready to just dump it into the bowl, and that is called mise en place. And that helps you, if you do that in advance, to help time your meals so they can get out more quickly if you don't have to take time to chop up your ingredients while you're cooking. So again, we're going to start with our granita today, because the granita needs to stay in the freezer for a very long time to freeze up. A granita is kind of like Italian ices. If you are familiar with those, sort of like ices that come in a stick, but they're almost like ice cream, sort of like a sorbet, but more granular, more ice crystals. And we're going to make homemade granita today. So to start that, let me get my blueberries here. We're also going to have with our granita chocolate dipped strawberries, which is why you have your chocolate chips in your little bowl. You can have it in a microwave safe bowl, ready to put in the microwave. You can have it in a little electric warmer like I have. But if you have a warmer, go ahead and put your chips in there. Get that started because that takes a really long time to melt. If you're going to use the microwave, just put your chips in a bowl and we'll get to those in a few minutes. The next step we're going to do is we're going to take 2 pounds of fresh blueberries. I got these blueberries from my local blueberry farm just down the road. And after you have washed them, you can rinse them out. I rinse mine since the container has holes in it already. I just kind of rinse it out over the sink. And you could check for any stems. You want to check for any spots that have any squishy spots. I found one blueberry with a squishy spot, but I just got these this morning, so all of these are pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to put all of my blueberries into my blender. Then we're going to take the pomegranate juice, and we're going to use 8 ounces. Now, 8 ounces is the same as 1 cup. So if you look at your container, this one says 16 ounces, which means it has 2 cups, because 8 ounces is 1 cup. So if I didn't have a measure today, because this Pom bottle has these little shapes, I kind of eyeball it and I figure 1 bump is half the bottle. But since I do have my measuring cup today, I'm going to go ahead and measure out exactly 8 ounces.
8 ounces.
See, if I had eyeballed it, it's almost 1 bump. Also have, Pom makes a pomegranate blueberry juice, which has 15% blueberry juice with the pomegranate juice. And you could use that if you wanted it to taste extra blueberry. The next thing you're going to put in, you can use 1/4 cup raw turbinado sugar, which is it's a little less processed than regular sugar at your house, but because my cooking shelves at the store were a little skimpy, I'm just using regular sugar today. And my family likes things sweet, so I kind of made it a little bit of a heaping cup of 1/4 cup of sugar. The next thing we're going to use is lemon juice. Now, you take your chef's knife and you just cut that lemon in half. Now you can see the seeds in here, and I don't want the seeds to end up in my juice. So what I can do is let me point this down so you can maybe see what I'm doing. Find a bowl. There, now you can see my cup. I'm going to put my hand here and use it as a strainer while I squeeze that lemon, and my fingers are going to catch any seeds. So my lemon was really juicy, so I've got a lot of juice here in my cup, and all we're going to need is 2 teaspoons. So after you've squeezed that lemon out, you can put the skins in the garbage. Rinse my hands off a little bit. I don't like my hands so wet. And then I hang my dish towel here so I know where it's at. So if you have measuring spoons around your house, you're going to want to find the 1 teaspoon size. If you're like me, usually I can never find my whole set of teaspoons. If you can only find your tablespoon, a tablespoon is the same as 3 teaspoons. So if you only use like 2/3 of this, it's the same as 2 teaspoons. So we're going to take, that's not the right size, take our 1 teaspoon size, and we'll get 1 teaspoon of lemon juice and 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. Now the rest of your lemon juice, you can put it in your refrigerator. You can do lots of different things. If you're thirsty, you can take the rest of your lemon juice, put it in your cup, find a little bit of sugar, throw in some water, and you're making yourself a little bit of lemonade to drink while you're finishing your ingredients. So don't just throw away that extra lemon juice. You can always find a use for it. Here, son, you want to put some water in that for me, please? Thank you, dear. I'm getting a little thirsty. So the next thing is 1 pinch of salt. So I've got a salt grinder. What I like to do if I need to measure something, my salt grinder comes with a lid. So I'll grind it with my lid still on it. And that way, when I pull my lid off carefully, I've got all my salt right there. So all I need is 1 pinch of salt, and I'll put that in there. Now I'll save this salt for later so we can use it in our pasta water. All right. So now comes the noisy part. We're gonna get the lid for my blender. What did I just do with it? There it is. I'm gonna put the lid on my blender. Let me pull my blender motor up. Oh, see, this is the difference between having a professional cooking kitchen and a cooking studio than doing it in your own kitchen. In your own kitchen, things don't always go so smoothly. Okay, so I'm gonna do, because this is a very powerful blender and it might hurt your ears coming through the electronics, so I'm going to mute my my camera when I turn it on. But what you're gonna do is you're just gonna turn on your blender, and you want to blend it until all the fruit is turned into like a smoothie, like you get at the juice store. So here, I'm gonna save your ears here. Okay, so there you go. Now, once you have that all blended, you're going to get your strainer. You want a mesh strainer, just like this. It's different than a pasta strainer because it's got tiny little holes there in the screen. Can you see that? Excellent. So you're going to want to take a big bowl like this. Let's see if I can get that camera to point down again. There we go. And I put my strainer over my bowl and I pour my granita right into there. You can see it's coming out very slowly. And I've got kind of a small strainer, so I need to let that sit for a little while before I can put the rest of my juice inside of it. All right, so if your strainer is acting really slow and you want it to go a little faster, you can get a spatula like this and maybe roll it around. A metal spoon may also work. What you're trying to do is get all those tiny little seeds out of your juice. As long as it's going through, you can tell it's working. This takes a little bit of time. So, well, I'm going to let that rest here. And those of you who need to let yours rest too, if you're going to be using your microwave to melt your strawberry chocolate, let's go ahead and do that part while we're waiting for the strainer to drain through. So what I can do is, like I said, you just put your chocolate in a microwave safe dish, and you'll want to come over here and put it in your microwave and only put it on for 30 seconds. If you put it on for much longer than 30 seconds, you could end up burning your chocolate and it would stick together. And always make sure when you're working with chocolate, you're using clean, dry utensils. If you like just washed a spoon and then you stir it into your chocolate, whatever water droplets are on your spoon will make your chocolate seize up and it'll get all clumpy and lumpy and it won't be nice and smooth. So make sure all of your utensils are very dry. So once you've microwaved that for 30 seconds, you're going to take your spoon and stir it up. If it's warm to the touch, make sure your parents are doing this. Don't burn your fingers. You can use a towel or a hot pot. Just stir those chips around. Depending on how melty they are, you may need to put it in for another 30 seconds. I'm going to put mine in for another 30 seconds here. While I'm waiting for the chocolate, I'm going to keep stirring my granita to get it through this strainer. Okay, the microwave says it's done. This time I know it's going to be hot, so I used a hot pot. So you're just going to stir up that chocolate so it's nice and smooth. And we're going to get our strawberries ready. If you haven't washed them yet, go ahead and make sure the strawberries are washed and they're nice and dry. Again, if the strawberries are wet, the chocolate won't like to stick to them. So I have a second strainer. I think I'm going to use a second strainer because this one's gotten all plugged up and it doesn't want to strain anymore. I don't know, can you see all those itty bitty seeds inside? Because usually you can see through a strainer, and this one is all plugged up with tiny little black seeds. Can you see that? And that's, you don't want to have seeds in your granita because you want it to be nice and smooth. Yeah, I probably should have started out with this bigger strainer to start with. It has more surface area to get the seeds out. That's the fun part of cooking. If you do something wrong, then you can just use your resources and figure out how to do it differently, and you can still get the job done. Now, sometimes people like to add different spices and things to their desserts, and some people might like to add a touch of vanilla or a touch of cinnamon, or even nutmeg would go good with these flavors. But today I'm just going to stick with the lemon juice and the sugar we added. Okay, see, I've almost got all of that granita worked through the sieve. Got my screen. All right. So now, because of time, we want to try and get this frozen before the end of our class, or at least mostly frozen. We need to get a move on. Put my strainer in here. Now, one thing to think about when you're cooking, if you rinse things off right away, when you put them in your sink, you don't necessarily have to wash them, but if you can rinse most of that fruit pulp out of those mesh screens before you go on to your next step, it's going to be a lot easier to wash them when it comes time to wash them than if you let it get all dry like fruit leather or like fruit roll-ups. It kind of make like a fruit roll-up that's stuck all in your mesh, and you don't want to deal with that when you're washing dishes. So give those screens just a little rinse to make sure they're good. So the next thing we need is our, let me move my blender out of the way. Also, you can wash your blender, and that will make that easier to clean later as well. Because when that fruit dries around the edge of your blender, it gets really, really sticky. So if you learn how to clean up as you go while you're cooking, then cooking will be more pleasurable for you, because then you won't have a big giant mess to clean up when you're done. So just give that a good rinse, and that will make it a lot easier. Now,
sorry, Miss Mary, I just wanted to remind the girls that it's especially important for you to clean up after yourselves while you're cooking and crafting at home, because that will make sure that your parents allow you to do this again in the future.
yeah. And there's lots of tricks. Like there's some things, if you clean it right away, it's easy to clean. And like I said, if you leave it for later, it's sticky and hard to clean. So learning to clean as you go is a responsible thing to do. Okay, so I went ahead and I put my cake pans. You should have had a metal cake pan on your list of supplies that you need. I went ahead and put mine in the freezer. Oh, I have blueberry juice on my arm. I went ahead and put mine in the freezer so that my cake pan could start getting cold. So I actually got 2 of them ready because I thought I would have time to do the whole, you know, magic cooking kitchen on TV thing and be able to swap one out for the other, but I ran out of time. But what I'm still going to do, I'm going to go ahead and use both of those pans, because when you freeze something, the smaller amount of stuff that you have to freeze, the faster it's going to freeze. So I dumped that in there, and I'm just kind of shaking it so it gets all around the bottom of my pan. And you can see it's already kind of like jelly or jam. It's got that kind of thick consistency. Almost like slime, isn't it? So you can tell everybody that you made slime for dessert today. So I'm going to put them in my pan so they're nice shallow layers of fruit. And then we're going to put them in the freezer so they can start freezing just like ice cream. There we go. So I've got my granitas sitting in my freezer ready to get nice and cold. So let's go ahead and can leave this camera on, and we'll get cleaned up for our next part of the recipe. So I'm going to take some wax paper, and I don't know if you have a lot of people in your house, but we've got so many cooks and bakers in my house that sometimes the boxes that these come in end up falling apart. So got that, and then I'm going to take my chocolate. And I'm going to take my strawberries that I've already previously cleaned and washed and dried, and you're just going to take those strawberries and you're going to dip it right into the chocolate, but only halfway. You still want half of the red berries to show. And then you put it out on your wax paper. because we're going to make a red, white, and blue dessert for 4th of July, because for one of our badges, and I'll look at my list so I can remind myself which level it was, you have to make a dish or a dessert to celebrate a holiday. So we're going to use red, white, and blue for 4th of July, and this is how we're doing our red and our white portion. So I leave my green stems on my strawberries, because then when you go to eat it, you can scrunch them up like this, and it's like a little handle that you can hold your strawberry with. Some people don't like to leave the green on their strawberries, and some people do, but I prefer to leave them on so you have a little handle to hold your strawberries with. Now, when you're done, you just want to set these to the side in a place where they can cool and set up. You can put them in your refrigerator, but depending on how much humidity you have where you live, you might start getting some condensation on the chocolate, which isn't ideal, but it happens. And if you drop your strawberry in your chocolate just like I did, that's okay. That can be your practice one that you eat on your own. Uh-oh. Okay. I just showed a bad example. When you are cooking and you get chocolate on your fingers and you forget and you lick it off right away, now you have to go back and wash your hands, because you can't touch everybody else's food after you've licked your fingers. But it happens. So just make sure. I know it's very tempting to lick that chocolate off your fingers when you get it all over. Don't worry, you can lick the chocolate off your fingers when we're done with the recipe. Depending on how many guests you're going to want to have at least 2 or 3 strawberries for each person that's going to be coming to your dinner party. So I only have 3 people at my dinner party today. So I have plenty. I've made much more than I need. Okay. All right, so I'm going to take my strawberries and set them over on the other side of my kitchen so they can get nice and set. All right, now I'm going to clean up that mess. And I'm not going to lick my fingers this time. Okay. So the next thing we need to use is we need, and I went ahead and used my large bowl for my granita, didn't I? Well, I'm going to wash that large bowl I used for my granita real quick, because I'm going to use that same bowl to make my noodles. And you want to get it, you don't have to worry about getting it totally dry inside, because you're going to get your flour wet soon anyway. But you want to get it dry inside. And we need to start our noodles because the dough has to rest for half an hour before we start to roll it out. So this is part of the recipe I was telling you about, where you need to time things. And you know that when you're making homemade noodles, you have to let that dough rest. So you know you can do that in between the rest of your preparation and your cooking. Now, the granita we put in the freezer, you need to stir that up and rake that up with your fork every 30 minutes. So we've only used about 15 minutes on our strawberries. We're going to use about another 15 minutes to put together our noodles, and then it will be time to stir up our granita. So I'm going to use a mixture of regular flour and the semolina flour. Semolina, remember I said, was the special flour they use to make specifically for pasta. But it's kind of hard to find where I live, so I don't like to use it all at once. So I'm going to use half and half. Now I do want to dry out my measuring cup that I just used for my juices, because if I don't have a dry measuring cup, then my flour will stick and I won't have the correct measurement of flour. So let me get over here to my recipe for my noodles. So what you need for your recipe is you need 3 large eggs, and you need 1.5 teaspoons of olive oil, and then you need 3 cups of flour with some salt. And let's see, it says we need 3/4 teaspoon of salt. I don't have quite that much ground up yet, so I'm going to grind up some more. So actually, let me start measuring that. I was going to show you. It's a little bit too full. So the thing with cooking versus baking, if I were baking, I would need to take a knife edge and scoop off the edge of my measuring cup and have exact ingredients. When you're cooking versus baking, you don't always need exact ingredients. See, I had that much extra flour on top of what I had in my cup. So cooking is a little bit more forgiving than baking. Baking is more of an exact science. And we're going to have a baking class next month to go over some of those skills, but cooking is a little bit more forgiving. So I scoop out my flour. That's 2. And you can sift your flour if you want to. It doesn't need to be finely sifted like if you're baking, but if you just take your spoon and stir it up and break up any lumps that might have happened. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a small bowl and I'm going to crack my eggs into that bowl. There we go. Okay, so we're going to crack our eggs. Put all the eggs in the bowl. And I like to crack my eggs on a counter instead of on a sharp edge like this, because a sharp edge can sometimes get pieces of egg into your egg when you put it in your bowl. Whereas if you crack it on a counter, then you see the egg is kind of smashed, and the piece of skin that's like inside the egg holds all those pieces of shells together. And then when you open up your egg, usually those shells won't fall in. Yep, I did it. No shells in my eggs. Now you're going to take your fork and you're going to beat those eggs. You're going to beat them up just like this. You take your fork and you're going in circles. You like go around the bottom of your bowl, lift, come back up to the other side, lift, come back up to the other side. That's called beating your eggs. And you want to beat your eggs until they look nice and yellow and you don't see any lumps of egg anymore. You don't want to see any clear lumps. You don't want to see any yellow lumps. You want it all to look nice and smooth. And I got the salt here, so we're going to use 3/4 teaspoon, and I don't have a 3/4 measure, I just have a quarter and I have a half. So when we add them together, that's 1/2 plus 1/4 equals 3/4. So I'm putting my salt into my flour. Can stir that around a little bit. And then my olive oil, again, we're going to use 1.5 teaspoons. Now, this is extra light olive oil, and you can use that in your cooking. When you use it like in your bread and noodles, it gives you a cleaner flavor. If you use extra virgin olive oil, it gives you like more of an olivey flavor. Some people think it tastes a little musky, Let's see, that was my 1 teaspoon. Let's get my ½ teaspoon. So the light olive oil is better if you're using it for bread or for noodles. And I was told that secret by my friend Raffaella, who is from Italy. So I figure she knows if she grew up on the stuff. While we're waiting, I have to show you one of my cutting boards that I love. It says, "A messy kitchen is a happy kitchen," and mine is delirious. Because my kitchen is always messy, because I have 4 kids that like to cook and like to bake, and my favorite is when my son comes out and makes homemade brownies for me, just without me even asking.
Excuse me.
So yummy. Yes. What's your question?
What if you added your oil to your flour instead of your eggs?
You know what? That happens. I sometimes make mistakes when I'm cooking, and don't worry about it. It'll still come out fine. The reason you add it to your eggs and not to your flour is because you don't want your flour granules to get coated up with the oil. Plus, you want that oil to incorporate all over your flour and not just get stuck in lumps in your flour. So if you did, that's okay. Don't worry about it. We're going to add it all together and knead it all together soon anyway. So what some of the grandmas do when they are making their noodles, let me pull this back right here so you can see a little better. They'll take their breadboard or their table or their counter, and they'll get it nice and dusted like that so that they're ready to work. So what a lot of people do when they're making noodles, they'll just take their flour and they'll put it in a pile right in the middle of their dough board. And they'll make like a mountain. I think it's fun to play with because it's like you're making a volcano. So you're going to make your flour all into one big volcano, and you're going to make a hole right in the middle of your volcano, just like that. Okay? Once you have your hole in your volcano, then you're going to dump your eggs in that hole. Oh, my volcano is a little bit small. I can't dump all of it. And then you're going to take that fork. Oh no, I have a lava flow. You're going to try and stir it to keep that egg inside the volcano as much as you can. But like I said, if you have a lava flow, don't worry about it. It'll go back in. It'll be fine. Oh no, there goes the rest of mine. I breached the dam. Oh no. This is the fun part. You can play with your food. I give you permission to play with your food. So you're going to stir up your noodles. Once it starts getting nice and combined, it will still seem kind of lumpy. Now what you could do, if you just start putting your hands in there and mixing it right now, you get all sticky. So what you could do is you could take a tiny bit of your olive oil, just a few drops, and put it on your hand and rub it on like you're putting on hand lotion. And that will help your hands not to stick quite so much. So now we're going to mess with our dough and play with our dough. And any of you who used to play with Play-Doh, this is what you're going to do. Now you'll see that your dough feels kind of crumbly and loose. It does not mean necessarily that it needs more liquid. Everybody's eggs are going to be a different size. So the amount of liquid in your dough is going to be different. Everybody's flour is going to be different. So it's going to absorb that liquid at a different rate. The more you knead that dough, the more you see it's going to come together. So I don't want to add more liquid until I've got that dough really coming together and I can tell if it needs more juice or not. So I can tell that my dough is feeling kind of dry. It's not really coming together nice and soft. See how it's a little too crumbly? It's almost like as crumbly as bread dough. I'm sorry, as pie dough. If you want your pie dough to be crumbly. But again, that's with baking. So I'm going to get myself some nice cold water. You want to use cold water versus hot water. And you only going to want to use a tiny little bit. So my flour needs a tiny little bit of cold water. Your flour might not. Your flour might be just perfect. But if you need just a tiny bit, try adding a tiny bit, then knead it together for a few minutes. Make sure you really get it together before you think you need to add more water. Okay, that's a little better. I still think I need a little more water. So you just keep playing with it. Part of this kneading of your dough helps to relax the glutens in your flour. I think part of the reason why I'm needing to use a little more liquid is I use that semolina flour, which has a different, it absorbs liquid at a different rate than regular all-purpose flour does. So if you just use regular flour, you may not need to use any water like I do. So if you are following a gluten-free diet, you could be using potato flour. You could be using chickpea flour. You could be using any kind of flour that you like to use. I've had some pasta from the store in the gluten-free aisle made even out of lentils, and it was delicious. So there's all different kinds of flour that you can find to make your noodles out of. Mine's slowly coming together. I think I still need a tiny bit of water. It's almost in one lump, so just going to use a tiny bit. And maybe what I'll do is I'll just use that tiny bit and what's left over here, so I'm not continuing to overwork my dough. Yeah, that made it a lot better. So if you talk to professional chefs, they have something called a bench scraper that kind of looks like a putty knife that they can clear off their crumbs off their countertop with. I'm just using the edge of my fork. So getting that all kneaded into one lump. And this is a good thing you can do. Baking bread or making pasta is good exercise. It's also good, like, you know, like those little stress balls that they can make, that you can use a stress ball. Well, this can be your stress ball. You can pound it, you can squish it, you can bunch it, and you're just gonna let it be. I think I need a little more. Still very tough. There. Because as your dough rests, it's going to continue to absorb some of that liquid. So there. Now it's kind of like Play-Doh. Play-Doh is what you're going for. You want to go for that kind of Play-Doh consistency. Okay. So now you can either take your saran wrap or a gallon-size Ziploc baggie or whatever you want to use. And once your dough feels like it's nice and smooth and not too lumpy, then you're going to want to wrap it up and let it rest.
So we had a question. So just add water if their dough is a little too dry?
Yeah, see how I had to keep adding water? And like I said, each day is going to be different because if it's humid that day, you might need less water. If it's really dry, you might need more water. If you're up high in the mountains, you're going to change your water amount also. So the best thing to do is to know what you're looking for and to be flexible. If you need to add more water, add more water. If you added too much water, grab your flour, put a little bit on your board, and knead it around, and that will take care of your extra water. Okay. So after we've kneaded this for, a good 3 or 4, maybe even 5 minutes, and it feels nice and smooth, then we're going to take our saran wrap. I've got my giant roll of saran wrap over here. Come on. My saran wrap doesn't want to cut. There it goes. And I'm going to wrap up my dough. And if you get really sticky saran wrap like me, you get to have all the fun of pulling it apart. But like I said, a Ziploc gallon baggie will work too. Whatever you have, Girl Scouts are resourceful. You can figure out how to use what you have available. So I'm going to wrap that up. And even after I wrap it up, I kind of squish it around and make it nice and round, just like that. I'm going to set that to the side so it can rest. Okay. So before we go on to starting on our chicken, we're going to pull out that granita from the freezer. And we're going to get a clean fork, or you can wash the fork you were just using for your noodles. And we're going to take that fork and we're going to scrape it through our juice. What you're trying to do, you'll notice on the sides, it's gotten really hard and crystally. In the middle, it might still be soft. But that's what you're wanting to get. You're wanting to get all those crystals and you're wanting to break them up. So you're going to want to stir up all that granita, scrape it off all the edges so you can get it stirred up with the juice inside the middle. You're going to kind of want to mash it like you're making mashed potatoes or mashed up peas. If you like your peas mushy. But you're going to squish it all up, stir it all up, get all those crystals nice and broken up. Because you don't want to end up with an ice pop. We're not going for ice pop consistency. We're going for nice, soft ice cream. So I'm going to smooth that all out again and put it right back in the freezer. Okay. We're going to do that exact same thing every half hour until we're ready for dessert. Okay. So I've got my space cleaned up. Let me wash out my cup so I've got it ready for my next recipe. So again, we still have some time for our noodles to rest. So we're going to go ahead and get started on preparing our chicken. Now, the thing you have to remember about chicken is you can cross-contaminate your food. Chicken is a risky protein for salmonella. So you always have to be very careful when you're using it to have a separate cutting board. This is my cutting board that I have just for meat, and I use it separate from what I have for my vegetables and my fruit. So I cleared all the rest of my utensils away, and what I'm going to do is, for this recipe, you need 2 large breasts or 4 small breasts. If you have the large breast like this, you can take off this little piece on the bottom. They sometimes call the tenderloin. If you want to keep that, you can. If you want to take it off, that's fine too. But what we're going to do to make chicken parmesan today is we want to have skinny chicken. See how fat that chicken is? So this is a step that the grown-ups are going to have to take. If you are a younger Girl Scout, if you are a senior and ambassador, you could probably handle this. Now, I've got my big chef's knife here, and what I'm going to do is I'm very carefully going to find about halfway of the thickness of this chicken, and then I'm going to slice right through that chicken horizontally. You want to make sure your fingers are out of the way. Oh, my knife moved. I'm going to make sure your fingers are safe and out of the way, because you want to cut that chicken breast right in half horizontally.
We had a request for you to slow down a little bit, Miss Mary.
Sure. I've got 2 more chicken breasts to show you on. So actually, I guess I've got 4. So you've got your chicken breast. You want it to be about 1/4 of an inch thick. So you just have your chef's knife, raise it up off the chopping board about 1/4 of an inch, and carefully with your fingers, don't get them in the way, just hold your chicken still with these fingers, and you let the knife do the work. Don't try to push it really hard. Just let it go back and forth and let the sharpness of your knife do the work. I'll turn it around so you can see how it comes through the other side. Now this is how you could be calling this making fillets. If you're cutting up meat and you only cut half the way through or 3/4 of the way through, that's called making a butterfly. But today we're not going to make a butterfly. We're just going to make some nice little fillets. So again, I flatten out my chicken. I find the thick part, and I'm going to cut it in half. Now this chicken was skinny on this side, but it was fat on this side, so I only cut it to right there so that these 2 pieces are the same thickness, because I didn't want to have 2 super skinny pieces. I wanted to have this about the same thickness as that. I've got 1 more in my dish to show you. I'm cooking so many today because I've got 6 people in my family. So many of you out there may not have that many people to cook for, but I'm gonna go ahead and prepare my chicken so that when we're done with this class today, I can go ahead and cook the rest of this chicken for my daughters. They went to a party, but they asked me to save them some food. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut all the way through the middle. Okay. So once you have that done, I'm gonna go ahead and put my knife in the sink so I can wash that with some soap, because you've got those chicken proteins on there and you don't want those scraps of chicken juice to carry salmonella to the rest of your kitchen. So I like to wash anything that touches chicken meat right away so that I don't have to worry about any cross-contamination. Because believe me, if you get sick from your food and you have food poisoning, I'm sure a lot of you parents have had it. You can attest that it is no fun. So, the next thing we can do is, remember I showed you this thing at the beginning of the program. Now, I know that some of you probably watched, oh shoot, what's Wreck-It Ralph. This is not Wreck-It Ralph's hammer. It looks like Wreck-It Ralph's hammer, but it's called a meat tenderizer. You see where it has all these waffle shapes on the edges? This has got big waffle shapes and that's got little waffle shapes. And that helps you to squish your meat flat too. So what you can do, sometimes if you don't have, say you're camping someplace and you don't have a chef's knife to make your chicken nice and flat, but you did remember to bring along the saran wrap, or again, even a Ziploc baggie will work here too. You put plastic on the top, you put plastic on the bottom. You don't have to have plastic, but if you do have plastic, then you don't end up with lots of meat stuck in the teeth of your meat pounder. Okay, I mentioned going camping. If you're doing this while you're camping and you don't have any meat tenderizer available, if you have any canned goods, there's lots of times I've used a can as my meat pounder. Anything that's firm, that won't break, you don't want to use glass, you can use a can if you don't have a meat tenderizer. This is just a can of my roast beef hash. So cans work, you can use your meat tenderizer. What this does is it helps to flatten out your chicken to a uniform thickness. And you want it to be a uniform thickness because that way it will all cook at the same time. You won't have some cooked and some not cooked. So I can go ahead. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and still use the tray that the chicken came in to hold my pounded breasts. So I can reuse my saran wrap. See, these edges are pretty skinny already. I won't really need to pound the edges, but this right here is a lot thicker than this out here. So that's why I'm using my meat pounder to make sure it's all level. I'm going to take away my cutting board and go wash that so that I don't have germs. And the next thing we're going to need is our 2 pie pans or shallow dishes to start mixing up our egg wash and our breadcrumbs. So as you clean up, if you want to get out your next 2 things that you're going to need, would be your next 2 dishes. Now, I usually save all my Marie Callender's pie pans for all my tools like this, but my daughters decided I had too many pie pans the other day, and they cleaned them up for me. So I'm just going to use a square dish. So you can use a square dish, you can use a round dish, you can use anything that has an edge just to hold your flour and your egg inside. So,
About how big should our dish be?
just big enough so that your chicken breast will fit inside comfortably. Now, one of the things I put in your supply list was a cookie sheet with a cookie rack to put your breaded chicken on. I could not find my cookie sheet. I had my cookie sheets, but I couldn't find my cookie rack this morning. So I'm going to go ahead and use my broiler pan. Like I said, you can use your resources, whatever you have available to you. If you have a cookie rack, that would be nice because it's going to let a lot more air around your chicken patties. But if you just have a broiler pan, you just have to use what you have available. So I'm going to get started with the next step with the chicken. We're going to crack the recipe that if you just have 2 chicken breasts, you're only going to need 1 egg with salt and pepper. Now, I have a whole bunch more chicken than that, so I'm going to need to use at least 2 eggs because I'm going to need more more stuff to bread all the chicken that I have. So you just crack your egg into your bowl, just like that. And eggs are also a salmonella risk. So if you get any of that egg juice on your fingers, quickly wash your hands off. Then I'm going to get my fork again. We're going to beat up that egg. Again, I'm using that circular motion. And when you learn to beat something, you're not using your wrist to beat. You're almost using your whole shoulder. Actually, I guess I'm using my elbow a lot, but you're using your shoulder too. And you're using it just to get all that egg stirred up. And again, the same rules apply. You want it to be, you don't want to see too many white lumps. You don't see any yellow lumps. You want to try to get it nice and smooth. It doesn't have to be perfect. So we're going to take some flour. Well, there's two ways you could do this. If you wanted to have it extra breaded, you could have a tray of flour and you could have a tray of breadcrumbs. But for this one, so we don't have it too coated, I'm going to use breadcrumbs instead of flour. You can get Italian flavor breadcrumbs. You can even use something called panko breadcrumbs, which are really crispy. So the panko are good. I like to use Italian flavor breadcrumbs because they're nice and fine and they already have a few Italian spices inside. So I've got my eggs in one pan. I'm going to sprinkle my breadcrumbs in another pan. You can
Excuse us.
Yes?
For the eggs, are you supposed to add salt and pepper to that?
No, I'm going to add the salt and pepper to my breadcrumbs.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So again, if you want to measure your pepper, I can grind it into there. If I just want to add as much pepper as I like. My husband likes lots of pepper. So I'm going to add a whole bunch of pepper. This is a thing that is about cooking versus baking. With baking, salt is a compound that has an effect on how something will bake. But when you're cooking, salt has more of an effect on what it tastes like. It has some effect on how it cooks, but you have more flexibility with how much salt and pepper that you want to add to your crumbs. If you're on a low salt diet, maybe you don't want to add any salt at all. Maybe you want to add some herbs and spices instead of salt. So that's the nice flexible thing about cooking. So what we're going to do is I've got my pan here ready to go. I'm going to take my chicken. I'm going to dip it into my eggs and flip it over. And then I'm going to dip it into my crumbs and flip that over. And if I want it to be nice and coated, maybe I'll flip it over twice and kind of press some of those breadcrumbs in it. Make sure it gets onto the corners and the ends. And once it's nice and coated, however I like it to be, then I'm just going to put it on my pan to rest. If you let it rest, then it gives it more time for that coating to stick to the chicken. So we're going to go ahead and flip this chicken over for the next one. And if you run out of eggs, just beat up another egg. If you run out of breadcrumbs, just put some more breadcrumbs in your tray. You just want to get them nice and coated. Well, I've ran out of breadcrumbs again, and I still have 2 breasts to go. Maybe I'll show you what panko crumbs look like. Panko crumbs are from, it's a typical ingredient in Japanese cuisine. So if you can't find them in your regular breadcrumb aisle, you might find them in your specialty aisle that has Japanese foods. And they look to me a little bit like potato chips. See how that kind of looks like crunched up potato chips? And they're much crunchier than regular breadcrumbs. So those are good to use. Salt, little pepper. Chicken going. You can see that looks a little bit different than the other breadcrumbs. They're bigger chunks. Okay. Now, if you have any leftover breadcrumbs, it depends on what else you are cooking that day. If you are cooking something that needs breadcrumbs that's going to go in the oven or go in a soup or something that's going to get over the boiling temperature, you can use these breadcrumbs. But if you're going to use them for something that does not need to be cooked, you don't want to use these because it has all those chicken juices in it and you'll get cross-contamination. So I don't have anything I need to cook these with, so these are all going in the garbage. Now go ahead and give my pan a little wash, because remember, eggs and this breading is going to be no fun to clean up afterwards. They'll get really sticky. Okay. Wash my hands, and again, wash your hands with soap, because you just handled chicken, you just handled raw eggs. You want to make sure your hands are nice and clean and ready to go on to our next step. So Candace, I forgot what time it was when we pulled out the granita last. Has it been about a half an hour?
Probably.
Okay. We're going to pull that granita out. Clean up all of my chicken stuff. Get a nice clean fork. We're going to slurp our granita again. Oh, it's getting really slushy now. Really want to make sure you're kind of mashing that up and getting all those ice crystals broken up. What I'm going to do, I didn't take a taste of this before we put it into the freezer. And sometimes your blueberries can be a little tart. So I'm going to try taste and see if maybe it needs more sugar. No, it's perfect. It's not too sweet. It's not too sour. It's nice and soft. So it still needs a little more freezing. So after you have all your ice crystals broken up, stick it right back in that freezer. It's looking more and more like ice cream. Okay, now for the next step, we are going to cook zucchini, Italian squash, to go with our chicken. Now, where did my knife go? I'm going to get a different knife since I use my other chef's knife on chicken. I'm going to get a new knife so I don't have to worry about cross-contamination. The next step we're going to take with the zucchini takes a half an hour for the zucchini to sweat some of their juices out, because you don't want your juices, your zucchini to be too falling apart. And if you can sprinkle salt on it and let it sweat out a little of those juices, it'll end up being a better zucchini dish. So I washed my zucchini. I'm gonna get my vegetable chopping block over here. Now, some of you older scouts whose parents are letting you use your knives, if you don't know the proper way to hold a chef's knife, you put these 3 fingers around the handle and these 2 fingers pinch the blade like this. That holds your knife securely and steadily, and then you'll have a lot more control. If you're just holding your knife like this, you don't have a lot of control. You need to pinch this part of your knife, and that will give you control. You also can use what's called a point fulcrum slice, where you slice down and then you come up, slice down, come up. It's almost like you're making a circle with your arm. Let's see if you can see my arm a little bit, but you're making your hand come up and down like that. And that's the safest way to learn how to cut with your chef's knife, because your chef's knife doesn't really like come down and chop, 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 chop. You want it to stay on the surface. These fingers you want to curl up like a kung fu grip. You're going to curl those fingers inside because you want the edge of the knife to touch the edge of your fingers. You don't want the edge of the knife to chop off your fingers. So you've got to keep those fingers tucked back, and your knuckles will tell your knife how close you are to your hand. So I cut off the end. I don't like the ends. And then as far back as you pull your left hand, that's how much your zucchini is going to get cut. And you're going to want to try to go for 1/4 inch slices. If it's too thick than 1/4 inch, it'll take longer to cook. If it's too skinny than 1/4 inch, then it'll cook too fast and kind of fall apart. Now my coins just rolled away. My food is rolling all the way.
It's okay, Miss Mary. You can say you're on a roll.
I am. I'm on a roll for sure.
Hashtag mom jokes.
Almost as bad as dad jokes.
But better.
Okay. So you can see not all of my slices are perfect. They don't have to be perfect. The reason you're wanting to try to get them uniform is so that they will all cook at the same time. And the more you can get your ingredients a uniform size, the better it's going to cook, the better it's going to taste. Okay, I was just showing the bad example of putting my finger on top of the knife. That's not how you're supposed to do it. It's a little bit difficult to retrain yourself once you learn how, like, professional chefs do stuff. But then once you figure out how to do it the way they do it, you realize it's actually much easier when you learn the proper way. But it's just like riding a bike or learning to swim. It always feels awkward at first. I was never trained professionally. I was just trained by my mom in my kitchen. So I learned the hard way how not to cut yourself with a knife. There I go with my finger again. Don't put that finger up.
Excuse me, do you know what the end game is on the zucchini? Like what are we making out of the zucchini part of it?
We're sauteing zucchini with onions and olive oil.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Oh, and bacon. So that's where your bacon comes in too. We're actually going to use some of the bacon grease to for sauteing the zucchini. Probably should have made this class a 3-hour class, because right now in my brain I'm thinking of all the steps I have left to do, and I don't know how we're going to be eating together in the next 45 minutes, because rolling out those noodles takes a little time. So this one zucchini didn't get very sliced.
If we're done cutting the zucchini, can I start on my bacon?
Yes, so go ahead and salt your zucchini and toss it around. You want that zucchini to sit in that salt for a little while to get some of that liquid out. You don't want your zucchini to be so firm. That salt's going to soften it and get some of the liquid out. So now that we've got our zucchini salted, clean up your scraps, throw them in the garbage. Now we've got our bacon.
How much salt do you put?
How much salt? Just like a teaspoon or so. Teaspoon, a teaspoon and a half. Just enough to that you can kind of coat all the pieces of zucchini with just a little salt. Now, I don't have strip bacon here. I have like the ends and pieces. I like to get this for cooking because sometimes it has more meat. And again, I brought back my meat chopping block because I don't want to use, oh, this is not sharp enough for, where did my nice knife go? There it is, I washed it. Okay, so I've got my nice knife and I'm going to chop up my bacon into little pieces. Now, if you were in Italy, you'd probably use a kind of bacon they call pancetta. If you've got some of that at home, feel free to use that. If you just have bacon, that's perfectly fine too. And you just want to make it nice and chopped up so you can get it started in your frying pan.
Miss Mary, we had a question about
Yes.
preheating the oven. Have we started preheating the oven yet?
We actually only need to use the broiler in our oven. So we don't need to start our broiler yet. We're going to fry our chicken. Because the chicken's been pounded so thin, it's only going to fry 3 minutes on each side. And then it's just going to go under the broiler to toast that Parmesan and mozzarella cheese. Okay, so now that we've got our zucchini sweating, we've got our bacon ready to go, we need to chop up our onion. So there's a couple of different ways you can chop an onion so that you don't cry so much. Some people think if you have a candle lit, it will help. But the way I chop up an onion that helps me not cry so much is there's a secret trick that I use that keeps most of the onion juices inside the onion and not in the air where it's going to get in my eyes. So I cut the top off my onion, I cut the bottom off my onion, I peel the outside of my onions off, and then I leave that cut side down on my chopping block because the more I can keep those cut sides from being exposed, the less of that sulfur kind of gas is in the air. And it's that sulfury gas is what makes your eyes start tearing up. So the next thing you're going to want to do to dice your onions. Now, in zucchini, fried zucchini, you can dice your onions, you can slice your onions. The recipe actually calls for dicing it, but I prefer to have my onions in slices when I saute them with zucchini. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to cut it in half like that, but I'm still going to hold the two sides together. I'm going to come through my fingers back out of the way, and I'm just going to slice off little quarter rings, just like that. I'm going to try and get them all the same size. I've got a few big pieces in here. Not the proper way to hold your onion, but that's the way I do it when I got a few pieces that are just a bit big. So I'm going to use a whole onion because in my family likes onions a lot. If your family doesn't like onions so much, you might only want to use half an onion. If you don't like onions at all, one of my friends is allergic to onions. You could substitute garlic. You could substitute maybe shallots or even mushrooms or something like that. That's the other nice thing about cooking. You can be flexible with your ingredients. So those are all prepped, ready to start cooking. But the next thing we need to do is take care of our noodles.
Do you need the eggs anymore?
I'm done with the eggs. Thank you, sweetheart. So I'm gonna.
You should tell them to, when you're done with stuff, put it away.
I have been. Thank you for that hint, though, Tina. My Girl Scout has showed up to help me. Okay, so I'm going to place my zucchini and my bacon and my onions over by my stove so they can rest over there. And I'm going to put my chicken out of the way over by the stove so it can rest over there. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out my noodles again. Where did my towel go? I left the towel there. I have to use this towel. Okay. I don't know if you saw my little trick, but if I just have this board on my countertop, it's going to slide around. But if you have a towel that's a little damp, oops, you put that towel on your countertop first, and because it's a little damp, it'll grip your counter and it'll grip your flour board, so it won't move around quite so much. So we've got your dough. You're going to pull it out on the counter, and you got a little tiny bit of flour there on your breadboard. I like to have a tiny pile of flour in the corner over here in case I need to use more.
Can I help?
And then I'm going to take my dough and I'm going to cut it in quarters. Because if I tried to roll out that whole bunch of dough, it would be way too big. So set these corners over here. Just start with one corner, and I kind of squish the ends in to make a round shape. I take that triangle, kind of make a round shape out of it as best as I can. Okay. And I'm, like I said, got to make sure my whole board has got flour. Put a little flour on the outside of my noodles. Make sure there's a tiny bit of flour all over my rolling pin. Now this is called a French rolling pin. See how it's one piece and it gets skinny on the edges? You can also use a regular rolling pin like this that has the turny handles. That works really well too. So this French rolling pin is the one I'm going to use today, at least to start with. And see how I rolled it, and then when it started coming up, I took it off and I flipped it over. I pulled over a little bit more flour, roll it out all the way to the edges, And if you start getting like a point like that, sometimes you want to kind of squish that back in because you don't want it to be too pointy. You want to try to keep it as round as you can. Then you're going to flip it over. If you got too much flour on it, you can rub some of that flour off. You're going to roll it out. Oh, it caught up and rolled right back. So the thing about when you're making noodles, you want to try to get your dough super, super, super thin, like almost as thin as paper, because it's a homemade noodle, it's going to get thicker when it cooks. I'm going to switch rolling pins. It's going to get thicker when it cooks and plump up a little bit. So you just keep turning it, making sure there's some flour so it's not going to stick. You just keep rolling it out and rolling it out. Actually, I do need to use this one because my breadboard got a little bit warped and the other one's a little too flat. So my piece isn't coming out exactly in a circle. That's okay. Just try to do the best you can. There, I accidentally flipped over a piece. Don't really want to do that. Get it out. So you just want to get your piece so you can like almost see through it. See how you can see the light shining through it? You want to get it nice and thin, just like that. Once you have it pretty thin, just almost like a chamois cloth like you use to wash your car with, then you can take a paper towel or a kitchen towel or something like that. This is a trick that my great-grandmother used, and she taught my mom, and my mom taught me, that you take it and then you can use newspaper, you can use a paper towel, and you take it and you put it over the back of a chair like this. And she would always let her noodles dry on top of the back of the chair like that. So we've got 3 more balls of noodles to roll out. Noodles are one of my favorite things. So if you want to come back next month for our baking class, we're actually going to work with our rolling pin again when we work with some pie dough. So pie dough has a little different technique than noodles. Pie dough, you want to touch as little as possible so it stays flaky and doesn't get all tough and stringy. The noodles, you want it to be, see how I can pull on this and it stretches? That's because the dough has been worked a lot and that gluten proteins have broken down and holding it all together. And with pie dough, you don't want that, but with noodles, you do. So there's different techniques for different things. All right, so.
What kind of noodles are these going to be?
Pasta noodles, just like spaghetti, but they're fresh instead of dried. Okay, so now I'm going to get that zucchini out, And my zucchini's been sitting with the salt, and you may be able to see that there's some water on the surface of the zucchinis. So you want to go to the sink, and you can put all these zucchinis in your pasta strainer and then rinse them. Get all that salt water off. Just really quickly. And then I'm going to let it sit in this strainer so all the water can come off. Now, while that's rinsing and draining, I'm going to pull out my granita and give it another stir. So you'll notice how this was our first recipe that we started with, and we timed all of our other recipes to work on it in between the spots where this needed to freeze. So I'm going to smash up all those crystals so it's nice and smooth. I don't want any lumps in my granita. I want it to be nice and just like snow. Nice and smooth. But again, you have to work quickly because if you keep it out of the freezer for too long, it will start to melt already, depending on how hot it is where you live. It's pretty nice where we are today. It's not too hot. But if you live someplace like Phoenix where it gets over 100 degrees almost every day, then you'll want to work really fast.
What were we supposed to do with the zucchini?
I rinsed off the salt water and I'm just letting it dry right here in my drain, in my colander, because you don't want it to be too wet still. But I wanted to get that excess salt off of it and all that excess liquid. Because when vegetables like zucchini or eggplant, they get sweated. That's what it's called when you put salt on it and you wait for the juices to come out. You're sweating them. That juice that comes out can sometimes be really, really bitter. And that's not going to taste good at all. So you want to rinse that away. So back into the freezer with my granita. Let's see. If we start that, we actually need to get our noodles going next, because we're going to start frying our chicken and our zucchini at almost the same time. So the next step we need to do is take your first piece of pasta that you laid out to dry. You're going to put it back on your breadboard. You're going to take your knife and you're going to cut right through it. And then I like to take this tiny bit, not very much, but just a teeny tiny bit of flour in between the layers so that those noodles don't stick together. Now I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to slice it one more time. I'm going to flip it over, and that's how big I'm going to have my noodles. Now, if you want to have super long noodles, you can just cut it once and cut the whole super long noodles. But I like to have noodles that are about the same length as my chef's knife. And you notice I'm going to try to cut them as skinny as possible, so we're going to pretend like they're spaghetti noodles. Now remember, because these are homemade noodles, these are going to puff up when they cook. So even though right now they look skinny like spaghetti, once they puff up, they may look fat like linguine. So try to get them as close as you can to each other. Just get that tiny little bit of noodles off the edge. And if you wanted to cut it in half so it didn't take so long and stack them 8 high, you can do that too. But the higher you stack it, the more chance you get your noodles to be sort of wanky and not exactly uniform. So sometimes it's worth it to stack it high and sometimes it's not. I don't think it's working out to be worth it. Mine aren't looking very uniform. I think with the next pile, I'm just going to leave it 4 high. So when you get to the edges, they get a little bit funny shapes. Just keep your fingers out of the way. Again, I'm not holding my knife properly, but then you can just take the noodles and you just kind of pile them up like that so they can kind of continue drying while you're cutting up your next pile of noodles. Let's see. There you go. Now you can see. All right, more noodles. Okay, while we're cutting up our noodles, you may want to have your grown-up or your helper or your girl start the water in your pasta pot. You're going to want to put 6 to 8 cups of water in a big saucepan or a big pot so that you can cook these noodles. And it's going to take a little while for that water to get to boiling temperature. So you're going to want to start boiling that water right now. So I already have my water in my pot on the stove. So I'm going to go over here and get it turned on. And then in your pasta pot, you want to make sure and put in a little bit of salt. So to most Italian grandmas, a little bit of salt for their pasta pot is like that much, probably close to a tablespoon, because they like to flavor their noodles so their noodles aren't all bland tasting. They want their noodles to taste a little bit salty. So you get that water started while you're cutting your noodles. Now, some of you may have at your house, they have these cute little gauges for spaghetti that'll say if you use that much, it's 1 serving. If you use that much, it's 2 servings. If you use that much, it's 3 servings. So you can decide, once you have this pile of noodles, if it looks like it's too much noodles for you and your family, you don't have to cook them all. You could cook half of them. And you could put the other half in a Ziploc baggie and stick it in your refrigerator or your freezer and cook it for another day. These are the same kind of noodles you can use for chicken noodles. You can use this for like beef stroganoff, any kind of noodles that you want. My noodles are getting kind of thick. I think I'm rushing too much. Sometimes cooking isn't just the part you do at the stove. Sometimes cooking is all the prep work, which, as you see, we've been at this class for a really long time, and we're doing lots of preparing of ingredients and lots of prepping. So we're almost to the cooking part. This is all part of cooking, but some people think you're only cooking if you're using the heat. But you know, actually, there's some people that eat something called a raw diet, and they don't use heat at all. They cook and they prepare all of their foods fresh. So it's all part of cooking. Now, when you're cooking homemade noodles, sometimes when you're cooking the hard store-bought noodles, you can get away with only using a little bit of water, and they'll still cook up really nicely. But when you're using fresh homemade noodles, all this extra flour that's around it will start making your water kind of almost turn into gravy if you don't have enough fresh, loose, hot boiling water around it. So you really do want to make a full pot of hot boiling water for your pasta. A lot of you may already have grated up Parmesan cheese, but my Parmesan cheese is almost gone, so I'm going to sit here and grate some of my own Parmesan cheese. And you may have gone ahead and gotten the shredded mozzarella cheese, but I noticed when I got ready to open it, this is actually sliced. So I still need to shred and grate my cheeses. So if you guys are prepared with your cheeses, just keep going on with your noodles while I prepare my cheese. You know what? Now that I notice this, my mozzarella is already sliced. And since my family loves tons of mozzarella, I'm just going to go with it. I'm just going to leave mine sliced. If you have shredded, that's perfectly fine. I'm just going to put slices of mozzarella on my chicken because my family loves mozzarella. And that's what, like I said, that's the fun thing about cooking is if you want to change your recipe up a little bit, as long as you know some of the basic rules on what you can change or how much you can change or how you can fix it. If you've like added too much water, you add more flour. You know, there's little tricks like that that you can learn. So adding a little more cheese on top of my chicken is not a big change. So I'm going to go ahead and use the sliced mozzarella. Okay, so I'm going to take my zucchini over to my stove. I've got my big frying pan ready for my chicken. I'm going to set that on the side. And I've got my little frying pan for my zucchini. But to start my zucchini, the first thing I need to do is start that bacon because we want that bacon grease to start coming out of the bacon so that we can cook the rest of the vegetables. Another thing you can do is take whatever pasta sauce that your family likes. I like different kinds of pasta sauce, but my husband loves ragu pasta sauce. So I know the Italian family that I lived with for 4 years when I was younger would be rolling over in their graves because it's not the same as Sunday sauce. Nothing is the same as homemade Sunday sauce. But if this is what your family likes and eats, then that's what you should make because that way your food won't go to waste. So clean up that bowl. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this saucepan on my stove on very, very low. And I'm going to cover it with a lid because as it cooks, it kind of pops and splatters, and I don't want to get popped with sauce. Here you have your bacon. My bacon coming to a sizzle here. There's my sauce in the back, getting warmed up. There's my water getting ready to boil. So you just want to put your bacon. I guess some of those pieces I didn't chop up very well. I can still chop them up with my spoon a little bit. You want all that grease to come out of your bacon. Okay, so my bacon getting nice and crispy. It's not too crispy. It's just about the perfect time for me to add my onions. So you want your onions to go in, and you want them to get a little bit soft before you add your zucchini. Now, while those are getting soft, my water has finally started to boil. But I have it on a bigger burner than what I'm going to have it on eventually.
What heat should we put it on?
Someone have a question?
They asked what heat they should have it on.
While my onions are cooking, I'm going to go ahead and start warming my pan for the chicken. And I've got my pasta water over here boiling too. But I'm not ready to add my pasta yet. So I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil into my pan where my chicken's going to go. I'm going to let that warm up. You want that to be nice and shimmering hot before you add your chicken into it. You can see the onions are starting to sweat. Some of them are starting to get a little see-through. That's what you want. You want those onions to get nice and see-through. But you don't want the fire to be so high that you're going to burn your onion. So if you start noticing the edges of your onions getting a little brown, you might want to turn your heat down to medium-high. Now I've got mine on high just because I'm using an electric stovetop, and electric stovetops cook a little differently than gas. Gas cooks a little bit hotter. And electric holds the heat for longer. So those are the benefits and differences between electric and gas stoves. So my oil is just about ready for my chicken, and I'm going to have to turn on, I'm sorry for the noise, I'm going to have to turn on my oven vent so that I can get some of the steam going out. Because as you see, I've got a microwave over my oven, and that steam does awful things to the inside mechanics of my microwave. So now I've got my chicken here, and because my computer is now on my stove, I don't have room for my chicken to be on my stove. So I'm going to put my chicken on my chair, and I'm going to start with just 3 pieces of chicken into my pan, because that's all that's going to fit in my pan. And we're going to cook that 3 minutes on each side. So since you never want to have raw chicken, you want to set a timer. So I set my oven timer for 3 minutes. You want to make sure it's not too high because you don't want to burn your chicken. So now that you've got one set of chicken started, these onions have started to get nice and soft. Now I'm going to take my zucchini, and I'm going to dump my zucchini right in on top of those onions. Okay. So I've got all my zucchini into my pan. Going to move them around just a little bit so they're nice and even. And those are sitting on top of those onions. I'm going to put a lid on top of that so it will cook. Now, I know it's not 3 minutes yet. Oh, what happened to my camera? But you can see one of my chickens is already cooking really fast. So I've got to turn that over because my fire is way too hot. I got to turn it down. So if your fire gets way too hot like that, you may even want to pull it off the heat, and so it can not be so hot that it's going to burn, because you want to make sure that chicken has a time to cook through, but you don't want to burn it. Okay, so we've got our pasta water finally rolling boil. We've got our sauce warming up. We've got our vegetables going. We've got our first batch of chicken going. We're going to start our broiler now. So I'm going to come over here to my broiler. I'm going to put it on low, and I'm going to hit start. And double check that I don't put anything in my oven. Some people like to store things. I have my heat press going in my oven. I'm going to leave that in there, because what that'll do is absorb heat and start shutting it back up. So heat press stones are okay to leave in your oven, but any other pans, not so much. So in the directions, it says to take your cookie sheet, whatever you've got your chicken resting on, and wash it again before you put it in the oven. But I don't have another chicken cookie sheet. So let me see. I'm going to grab some paper plates. 12 seconds left on these chickens. This tiny one is a whole lot more cooked than these big ones, so I'm going to take it off first. Okay, there's my first chicken. Now, you can cook it 3 minutes on each side if your chicken is very thick. If your chicken is really thin and it's pretty much cooked through, then it'll be ready to pull over to the side. And then add a little more olive oil.
Mary, what temperature do you have the oven on?
Broil low. Broil is the spot that's higher than 500. It usually has, a lot of ovens will have a heating element on the top and have a heating element on the bottom. And the broil is when you only use the heating element on the top and it gets super, super hot. I'll show you on my oven. You can kind of see how it's glowing red hot on the top, but on the bottom it's not hot at all. That's what a broiler is. Some ovens have a little drawer underneath. I have 2 ovens, but some ovens have a little drawer underneath. That's where their broiler is, and it comes out like a drawer. But my oven has the broiler right in the oven.
Oh, it's on your thing now.
So we're cooking our next batch of chicken. My sauce is warming up in the corner. I can see some steam starting to come out of my vegetables.
So Brianna asked, what do we put in the oven?
When we're done with our chicken patties, we're going to put them back onto the broiler pan. We're going to coat them with some cheese, and then we put them under the broiler just to toast that cheese. So really the part that really cooks the chicken is here in the frying pan. Okay, so I turned my chicken down so you can see it's not burnt like my first batch was. It's taking a lot longer. So I'm gonna go ahead and set another 3 minutes for the opposite side. But you can kind of tell when your chicken's cooked, if it's really flexible and squishy, you can tell that it's not cooked all the way through. But if you can touch it and it feels really firm and hard, not too hard, but you know, like chicken nuggets hard, and then you can tell that it's cooked, because you never want to eat raw chicken. Okay, since we got our second batch of chicken going, I'm going to go ahead and get our pasta started in the pot here. I'm going to go ahead and dump all my noodles into this pasta pot. Try to do them a little bit at a time, because if you put them in one lump, they might cook together in one lump. So you want to try to make sure they're separated. So I like to use tongs with my pasta to just loosen it and kind of break up the lumps. Okay. There's all of my pasta. Sorry that my camera is being a little crazy. It's not as still as when I have it on a tripod. Okay. So we've still got 53 seconds left. I'm going to give the zucchini a little toss. Try to get some of that bacon and onions up going around. And yes, I just made zucchini fall out of my pan. So that happened. Pick it back up. Your stove top should be clean. You can put it right back in.
How long do we cook the pasta for?
The pasta should cook like 3 to 5 minutes until it's called al dente. Now you notice I put so much pasta in my water that it has not come back up to a boil yet. You want to make sure your water comes all the way back up to a boil, or it won't cook those flour proteins and your pasta will taste very floury. So you want to make sure and test your pasta before you drain it, because if you just go by the timer, it may not be done. So you want to let that pasta cook until it's done. Okay, my timer just beeped, which means my chicken has had 3 minutes. So it looks nice and done. I've got 2 more patties myself to cook before I can get it onto the broiler. That gives you some time to catch up if you're still working. So I'm going to go clean off my broiler. Oh dear. Oh, there goes my pasta water. Gotta save my computer. Yeah, you gotta keep an eye on that pasta water because it will boil over. Okay.
Mary, how long do they cook the zucchini for?
You cook the zucchini until it's tender. So what we're going to do is we're going to test it with a fork and see if it's done. So now that I have my broiler nice and clean again, I'm going to put all my chicken on top of it and wait for. You should probably be using a tongs because it's a little warm. Wait for my other two pieces to be done. Grab some more paper towels. I still have a lot of water on my stove. Okay. Where's my camera? There it is. All right. So. If you want to put it back on my phone camera, that'd be great, Karina. So those chickens, I turned my stove down a little too much, taking a little too long to cook, so I'm having to turn my heat back up. You can see that the zucchini is still not quite see-through. Like this one here on the edge is looking a little more see-through. This one here on the top is looking still a little bit opaque. So I want to toss that and turn it up, get some of those zucchinis from the top to get down to the bottom. See, that zucchini got nice and caramelized because it was right on the bottom of the pan. You want to make sure none of your ingredients are going to burn. All right, put the lid back on that. Now, since I have an electric stove, that heating element keeps a lot of heat on it even after I turn it off. If you have a gas stove, you can't do this. But if you have an electric stove, I can turn that off, and that's still going to stay hot. But I don't have to worry about it burning anymore because I turned the heat off. So it looks like my chicken's ready to be flipped over. Looks like I still need a little extra olive oil on this one chicken breast. Didn't get quite crispy yet. Now I think my pasta is almost ready. So I'm going to try some of my pasta here. I'm going to pull out one piece. Oh, one piece has already volunteered to come out for me. Oh, it's stuck together with its neighbor. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and try a bite and see if it tastes like it's done. Well, it's a little bit chewy. Sometimes you can tell if you look right into the, I'm not sure if my camera will focus, but if you look right into the middle of the pasta, if it's not done, you'll still see a white spot right in the middle. And if it is done, then you won't see that. I don't know, they taste still just a little bit tough to me. I'm going to let it cook just a little bit longer. So try your pasta and see if your pasta tastes right to you. If it tastes right to you, you can go ahead and drain it. But my pasta needs a little bit more cooking time. I'll turn my chicken over.
Clean my white stuff.
Okay. So now comes our cheese. I'm going to put them on top of the computer. Okay. So while those two are finishing up with the last bit, I'm going to put a piece of mozzarella on top of each piece of chicken. If you have shredded mozzarella, just put a little pile of shredded mozzarella, however much mozzarella you want, on your chicken. Just keep in mind that cheese goes a really long way. So don't put a humongous pile, or all you'll have is one big lump of cheese. You just want to make a nice little pile of cheese. My last two pieces of chicken are ready to take out of the pan, I think. This one's a little thicker. It needs like 30 seconds more. Put some cheese on that. I'll start sprinkling on the parmesan. Because my noodles are getting almost there. Sprinkle on that Parmesan. I think my last piece of chicken is ready to go. Get it on the pan. Get the cheese on it. Get my Parmesan on it. Thank you. Son, will you give me a hand? My hands are covered in cheese. Will you grab this broiler full of chicken and put it in the oven for me, and I'll video you doing that.
Sure, is there an oven mitt?
It's cold right now. You don't need an oven mitt yet. Thank you. He's opening up the stove. Top shelf, yeah. So you notice I did not put my stove the highest rack that I possibly could. I put it the second rack I possibly could. Go ahead and put it over there. Now we only want that to toast for no more than 3 minutes because we don't want our cheese to burn. So I'm going to put on my timer here and start that. All right, so now I'm ready to drain my pasta. Drain out my pasta.
How long do we cook the zucchini for?
The zucchini was until tender.
You don't
and the
have to drain it
chicken is
entirely
minutes.
because those last little drips of juice you can keep in your pasta because it will help your pasta not stick together. So now we've got our pasta cooked. I just heard my oven beep that tells me I've only got 1 more minute for my chicken to broil. Move my hot pan over here so it's out of the way and nobody will get hurt. Now, I want to take my spaghetti sauce that I've been warming over here in the corner. I'm going to take a little bit of that, just put it into my noodles. Just to keep them nice and loose. Oh, there's my chicken. Well, if you come over here, I don't know if you can see, my chicken is not too brown yet. I think it could use a little bit more browning. So I'm going to leave it for 1 more minute. So my zucchini is all done. My pasta is all done. I'm waiting for my chicken to come out of the oven. Okay, so my chicken is getting nicely bubbled. Let's see here. A little bit browned in the back, but it's good enough. We'll go with it. I don't know if you noticed my strawberries are still sitting right over here. We're ready for dessert. Got a plate. I'm going to take a little pile of our noodles. One of our chicken parmesans. I'm going to take a scoop of my sauce. Make our chicken parmesan look all pretty. I'm going to take some of our zucchini. I've got 3 people going to eat with me, maybe 4. But right now I've got my place setting set for 3 people. So now we're going to take our plates over to our dining table, which when you have your dinner table all set up, you of course have your knife and spoon on the right, your forks on the left, we have our dessert spoon at the top, we have our drinks, and we have some lovely candles to start our dinner party. So at your home, you're ready to sit down with your family. We can sit here and enjoy a nice meal together, and I'd love to hear how your cooking went and what was your experience of today. And you could also have some garlic bread to go with this if you needed. I'm gonna pull out my granita so we can give it one more stir before we start to eat. That's pretty good. I'm gonna dump it all back in one pan.
Hi, we just want to say thank you, and that we're gonna go since we're in a different time zone, so we're gonna eat later with our family. But thank you so much.
Did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. This experience was really fun.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. We had so much fun. And don't forget to like this video and to subscribe to our GSCCS YouTube channel for more fun activities. So now we're going to put our granita back into the freezer and go eat our lunch.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Enjoy your lunch. It looks delicious.
So,
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
you're welcome, girls. Thank you for joining us. So this is my Italian dinner party. The ambassadors have in their badge that they have to do a dinner party. So this satisfies the ambassador badge level.
Where? Sauce.
So I'm still working on mine, but I'm almost done.
So
We're done.
that's lovely. I like that. Did you try it yet? Does it taste good?
Yeah.
Excellent. So today the brownies needed to make a holiday dessert, which we're still going to finish that up as soon as we're done with our meal. We're going to put our granita and our strawberries together. For the juniors, you had to cook 3 things for a meal: a protein, which was our chicken, a vegetable, which was our zucchini, and a starch, which was our noodles. And we need to time them so they all come out at the same time. Do you think we did that? Thumbs up if you accomplished that. Good job. Okay. For cadets, we needed to cook something from a different country. So for cadets, we based our meal all on Italian foods today. We have our chicken parmesan, our Italian squash, and homemade noodles. For seniors, you needed to start a dish with something from scratch and something that was grown locally. And we got our eggs today from a local farmer that has chickens. We got our blueberries from a local blueberry farm and our strawberries from a local strawberry farm. Then for ambassadors, we need to make a menu timeline, learn about mise en place. Remember, that's something we talked about in the very beginning, how you have all your ingredients in little bowls ready to go, just like the TV chefs do. And then to have a dinner party. So I'm going to go ahead and dig in while you guys finish cooking, and I would love to see how your food turns out. We'll go ahead and we'll eat together for about 5 or 10 minutes. I want to hear what you have to say, and then we'll go fix our dessert. So this is one of the reasons why my family likes to eat convenience foods, because sometimes to cook a real gourmet home meal, it can take you a while. And if you've got soccer that night or Girl Scouts that night, it takes, you really don't have time to spend this much time to make a nice meal. But when you want to do something fancy or do something special and have a dinner party, it makes it really nice when you take the time and make ingredients from scratch, because you really can taste the difference.
Parsley was on the ingredients list, but I don't know what you're using it for.
Oh, parsley? I apologize. The parsley is supposed to be sprinkled over the chicken parmesan. I forgot to do that. It just makes it pretty. It also gives it a little fresh flavor, but it makes it pretty too. Thank you for remembering that, Tiger Lily. Well, I'm almost done with my lunch. I'm going to give you all like 2 more minutes, and then we're going to work on our dessert. So that way, if you haven't had your lunch yet, your dessert will be all ready for you when you finish your lunch. And those of you that are finished, I want to try to get this done by 1/2 the hour so that we're not too late in keeping you today, since we've already gone over time.
On our strawberries, we put blue sprinkles.
You put blue sprinkles. That sounds awesome. We're back in the kitchen again. And I'm going to, yes, you can have one strawberry. I'm going to make some space so that we can make our dessert.
Yeah.
I appreciate you cleaning for me. I really appreciate it. Okay. So here comes our strawberries. I'm going to take my breadboard off the counter. I'm going to get our granita out of the freezer. Gonna get a little bowl. My granita one more time with my fork just to make sure it's all chopped up and nice and fluffy everywhere. Nice loose ice crystals. I don't want any big chunks. I know. And after you have your nice blueberries, it's not exactly blue like the blue sprinkles or red, white, and blue, but it's a natural blueberry. So we're going to take some of the granita and put it in our bowl. That's about as much as I'll probably eat. Phoenix, would you like a bowl of granita?
Sure.
It's like ice cream. But it's like Italian Ice's ice cream.
Like Dippin' Dots, basically.
Well,
Kind of.
Dippin' Dots has got a cream base like ice cream, and this has a fruit base, kind of like sorbet.
Okay.
But when they make sorbet, they usually put it in an ice cream so that it's stirred all the time. And this is called granita because it is frozen in like ice chunks. And then you just take your strawberries like that. You put it right on top of your granita. So you have your red, white, and blue dessert for our brownies. So that ends the rest of our meeting today. Does anybody have any questions before we sign off?
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful meeting.
Well, thank you. We are going to make new friends before we leave. I just wanted to check to make sure anybody had any questions.
Hello.
What was that, Brianna?
Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I had so
We had
much
a great
fun.
time. Thank
today.
you. This was really fun.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it, Kaylee and Brianna. Okay, so let's go ahead, everybody. Cross your hands and we'll sing Make New Friends.
Hold on.
Oh, Phoenix is going to come sing with me. Let me tip it down.
Thank you.
You come. Scooch over. Ready? Make new friends.
New friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other is gold.
So it's round, it has no end.
You have a hand, I have another. Put them together and we have each other.
Yay!
Yay! Thank you, Miss Mary. This was wonderful.
Thank you. I enjoyed having you in my kitchen to cook, and I enjoyed being welcomed into your kitchen to cook. Thank you so
Oh,
much for
anytime.
inviting me into your homes today.